Hello and welcome back here to the latest episode of the Big 12 Huddle. As usual, I'm your host here, Calvin Alexander, host of the CJ Tour podcast, and frequently always joined by Roger from the United Ones podcast. Always got to get the plural in there at Night Bengal. And this week's episode, we are joined by the Wildcat Radio 2.0 guys and Brett and Adam. So how's it going, guys?
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. In case you missed it, I recently was on the Adam and Brett's show there, Wildcat Radio 2.0, and was able to give them a bunch of crap about Mike Stoops, which was a good time. So, really, all of us are not Mike Stoops fans. We have no reason to be, none of the four of us. So, maybe
that's not entirely fair.
I don't know. Maybe there were some fun memories. But
he made Arizona be respectable for a couple of years and left Rich Rodriguez with some good talent and got guys drafted. But, the end wasn't as good as the middle, which was way better in the beginning. But, that's football coaches in Arizona normally.
It's a progression.
Makes a lot of sense for sure. Well, on tonight's episode of the podcast here, we are going to run through a couple different things here. The Big 12 offensive ratings, the Coaches Bowl ratings are out for the first week. And then also there's a little bit of Colorado needs to calm down a little bit. And we'll get to that later on. Unless you already know. So, Roger, I will let you tee us off here with what was your biggest takeaway from the offensive ratings from last season in the Big 12 of all the schools?
Well, we were number one without Oklahoma, so I'm happy about that. Our challenge, though, is we were a great offensive team, but we didn't do well with scoring offense. So that's the biggest bugaboo we need to fix this year. Outside of that, the top four really for those that are left in the I won't call them the leftover Big 12, the
legacy.
Legacy. Oh yeah. Hey, listen, we were only in the league 1 year and we're now legacy. I love it. All right. So it was last year. It was UCF, then TCU, then Kansas and Kansas State. So it'll be really, really interesting because all of the offenses, if you take a look at it. The top three offenses were within a few hundred yards of each other. Everybody else is kind of hanging around 5,800 yards of offense to 6,000, all the way down to number 12, Baylor. So the top 11 teams were all fairly close as far as the yardage that they put together. Some people did it in different ways. Last year, it was a lot more run heavy than what you would expect from the Big 12. When we joined, we certainly set up our defense for a pass-heavy offense, which did not happen. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, everybody was running the ball. So that was an eye-opener for us, but I think we're better prepared for that this year. What's interesting, too, at least from UCF's perspective, we don't play anybody that was left over from last year except for two teams. Everybody, we get all the new Pac friends that have come to play. So excited for that. It'll be interesting to see how everybody stacks up now that the folks from the Pac have come to join us. Last year in the Pac, I was taking a look at that too. Arizona, 58-24 as far as yardage was concerned, which would actually rank them somewhere between TCU and Kansas. So probably a top four offense last year in the Big 12, and you guys didn't lose a lot of pieces. So it'll be really interesting from an offensive standpoint how Arizona stacks up in the Big 12.
Yeah, that includes all the fun wonkiness of the Jaden Delora era, the first part of that season with, how many picks did Jaden Delora throw in the first half against Mississippi State, but then almost brought us back to win the game?
It was like 4 in the first half.
Oh no, and Adam just already froze again. Technical things failed already.
Well, we did get that it was 4.
Yeah.
I think that was just interceptions. I think there was also a fumble. No, it's going to be interesting, and it's funny you look at this and you look at Oregon had 7,440 yards last year. They kind of beat up on some teams. One of the more fascinating things of the teams coming from the Pac into the Big 12 in my mind is Utah, because their offense was pretty anemic last year with Cam Rising out. They're way down there at 348 yards a game, just above ASU of 322, where I think their second leading passer was their top running back, and their second best punter was their top running back, Cam Scadaboo. Utah might make a big leap there, so that'll be something interesting to see if Cam Rising is healthy. And then Arizona lost, they kept a lot of talent, but they've also lost a first-round left tackle in Jordan Morgan. But T-Mac is there, coming off a foot injury. Noah Fafita, he puts up the numbers like he did last year all season. He's a Heisman candidate, right? But we'll see. There's a lot of talent there. They lose Jacob Cowing also, but there's been some guys that they brought in that look like they're going to make a leap, take some of the pressure off T-Mac. And the tight end room is looking pretty dominant from early returns in camp, even despite losing a tight end to the NFL in Tanner McLaughlin as well. So Arizona seems to be reloading pretty effectively.
Yeah, interesting point about Utah. Utah the previous year in 2022, they had 6,536 yards, right? So last year was a lot of ball control, and Utah did a lot of good things with their defense. They've had a good defense. They're coordinated well for several years, and they're going to be doing the same thing this year. But at that 6,500 yards, that would put them right there at the top offensively when it comes to the Big 12. Compared to last year, UCF had 6,300. So Utah reloading with Cam Rising, the octogenarian quarterback that they have. He really makes a huge difference, and there's a reason why Big 12 coaches and a lot ourselves as well on the Big 12 podcast have said Utah's one to look out for. They have a good defense. They've got Cam Rising back, assuming he had a pretty devastating, really, knee injury that he was recovering from. So it'll be interesting to see if he's the Cam Rising of old. Has he risen, or is he the Cam Rising that's slightly hobbled? We had our own experiences with that at quarterback with Mackenzie Milton, and unfortunately, he just wasn't able to come back the way that any of us would have wanted for him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how well he's healed. And how much of the old Cam Rising we will see.
So I'll see if my internet can handle this real quick before I got to duck out, I imagine. But there's a reason why Pac-12 fans we all know what Utah's all about. They've been not the premier program, not the flashy one. No, they're not Washington, the national championship. They're not Oregon, probably should have been in the playoff and choked it away every time against Washington. But they're well coached. They play physical football. They're good all the way around. Like last year with Rising out, they were a mess offensively. I know Brett and I, we were down at the game in Tucson when Arizona just smoked them. Like Utah looked really bad. With Rising, they're back to being Utah. Even if he's like 85% of what he used to be, just that experience, like they'll have a capable quarterback to go along with everything else. So, there's a lot of talent in the conference, and I know a lot of Arizona fans are excited what they might be able to do moving to the Big 12, but there's usually they're picked to finish fifth behind Utah because Utah has a lot of respect and deserves a lot of respect for what they've done in the past in the Pac-12 with a conference that they weren't flashy. They weren't the high-flying, high-scoring, up-and-down the field offense, but they would score plenty of points to go along with a very physical defense and win football games. So wouldn't shock me if they're quite good again in their new conference.
Well, I think to Roger's point, even, Cammy Boy, because a lot of guys go to college for 7 years, even if he comes back at 85%, but he's been in college for that many seasons, that experience is inherently a leg up, even if he's lost a lot of his physical ability, right? Yeah, I'm trying to squeeze in as many little puns and jokes in there, Roger, as possible.
Bad jokes.
I thought Cammy Boy was pretty good too.
I like Cammy Boy. I think that's what I'm going to call him here in September. When we got to play them, because I'm nervous about that game for sure for Oklahoma State. But you got the 2 7-year quarterbacks facing off against each other, and Alan Bowman and Cam Rising. And if you had me on the field, you'd have a 6th-year guy as well. So I definitely enjoyed those 2 extra years of college, much needed as well there too. But I want to ask you guys, the Arizona fans, because I haven't been watching Cam Rising I've not been watching him relatively at all, but I mean, just here and there. Is he that good? Is he just is he really good at least in the pocket passing ability, or does he really just get out there and run around and just kind of a mobile quarterback? Because I know what Bowman's good at, right? And that's definitely just stand there in the pocket, lobbing him deep, trying to be accurate, trying to put some power on the ball. But there's no way Alan Bowman is sprinting around, being mobile. And if you've played college football 25, he might have the worst speed rating of any player in the game. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure there's some punters or stuff, and I'm being tongue in cheek. But yeah, I want to ask you, Brett. I mean, what do you think? Do you think Cam Rising could be the best quarterback in the Big 12 this year? Is that a possibility?
It looks like we lost Abner to technical things, so I have to carry the weight here. I think it's a possibility, sure. I think Cam Rising has always been somebody that's just a solid all-around player rather than really excellent at any one thing. Had decent mobility, decent arm strength, decent accuracy. And you put all those things together or with a Utah program around you with, a solid defense, usually some big nasties up front to block. And that guy can be really successful, right? So I don't know if there's anything, though, that I would say that he is like that peak talent of anything. But also it's Utah, and you put that guy with that much experience surrounded by that much talent, and I certainly think it's possible. Of course, I'm a little biased where Noah Fifita doesn't have the, some of the physical tools, but boy, all of his intangible tools and leadership skills and some of the tools that he has around him make me feel good as an Arizona fan. But yeah, I think it's going to be really curious to see. Last year it was always, they never, really report on the injuries, and it's like, well, is he coming back? Is he coming back? And they had I forget the name of the young guy quarterback, was really more of a mobile guy. And so they just kind of did ball control offense almost every game and rely on that defense. And they've won a lot of games doing that. Cam Rising opens up the passing game a lot more, even if he's not mobile. If he becomes Drew Bledsoe back there, you can probably win a lot of football games with that Utah roster and that kind of level of a Cam Rising.
I guess here's what I would just get at is like I don't think of Utah outside of Cam Rising and Kyle Whittingham. Like I don't, I know their defense is stout, but I think of them more as a K-State type of team. If I'm trying to kind of be relative here in the Big 12, where got a quarterback who's decent. Of course, Avery Johnson I know is just going to be a younger dude who's fresh in the pocket, so that doesn't really equivalent here at all. But head coach, really good head coach, and also just has a quarterback that's been there for a while. But I don't know any Utah wide receivers or running backs or defensive guys, honestly, off the top of my head, that I'm like, oh, I'm just super impressed by those names or by their play style.
It's consistency, right? So, and execution. That's the thing. And to your point about Kansas State, that's really what they're known for too. And even if you go to Kansas and Lance Leopold, that's what he's known for too, is consistent blocking, consistent execution. The Red Raider offense, under Mike Leach, that he was known for having very few plays, but executing them at a very, very high level and doing it quickly. And he was very successful at Texas Tech. It's kind of the same thought process. You have a very experienced coach who's been there a really long time. He's got his guys. They're older team, meaning they return a lot of upperclassmen, juniors, and seniors, and they're just very consistent in how they execute their blocking schemes. With Cam Rising coming back, he knows the system, right? So I'm not saying that Utah's success is just the system, but what I am saying is the players that are operating within that system are very experienced and they execute at a very high level. They're just fundamentally good. Same way with Kansas State, as far as that's concerned. And that's a good analog when it comes to that. But that's my impression of Utah. And again, when you pair that offense, a consistent offense that doesn't have a lot of turnovers, right? Because for UCF, for example, we lost 4 games, I think, by a grand total of, or 3 games by a grand total of 3 points. So the Big 12 consistently has close games. There's not really a whole lot of blowouts in the Big 12. So if you have someone that can consistently execute, doesn't make mistakes, and has a good defense, you get a good shot of having a very, very good team in the Big 12.
Yeah, and don't forget, Utah had like some decent receivers last year, like Mikey Matthews, who I think transferred out, but the sneaky talent that's there, you guys probably don't even realize it because he kind of flopped a little bit last year. They have a wide receiver that transferred in this year at Utah that had 1,100 yards at Arizona 2 years ago as a receiver in Dorian Singer, who bailed to USC and kind of stubbed his toe a little bit with a Heisman Trophy quarterback and throwing to him, and he only had 200 and something yards, and now is at Utah. I'm actually curious to see Dorian Singer's fit there, because he's a guy that's not necessarily, he got all those yards at Arizona. He's not necessarily a burner. He's not necessarily the world's best route runner, but man, he was really good at 50-50 contested balls, if there is such thing as a downfield possession receiver in college football, because he's not running by guys, but he would get contested 30-yard catches along the sideline all the time, which is, to me, an interesting fit with Utah and a Cam Rising, where they're going to do a lot of ball control. Maybe he is that kind of deep-ish threat when they need to try to open things up and just, do what Johnny Football used to do and just toss it up to Mike Evans and be like, go catch it, and make Johnny Manziel look like he's a great quarterback just by throwing to a, first round 6'5". Yeah, exactly. So I think Singer's going to be really interesting to watch if he can come back, or not come back, but get back to the level he was at Arizona. I'm not sure which Dorian Singer they're going to get, but they're going to be Utah's offense might be the highest variance team going into this season, where we think they could be really good, or they could be last year's hot garbage again.
Well, the other one that I'm interested
for sure.
Yeah, the other one that I'm interested to see this year is how TCU performs. They obviously had an off year, but the year prior to that, so 2022, doing an apples to apples comparison there, 6,800 yards. So they were a pretty prolific offense. Obviously, they made it to the college football playoff championship game, right? Did not do well there, did not represent us well there, but and last year had an off year because they had some injuries. But I'm really interested to see what TCU does this year offensively.
Yeah, I think you guys would probably know better than I would, because I was always focused on the Pac-12 games. TCU kind of feels like a model for what Arizona fans kind of hope for, where they can sneak into a national title game as not a perennial power, but then you can kind of fall off. I'm pretty sure TCU gave up 6,800 yards just against Oklahoma in the last game of the season last year.
But so did Oklahoma. Their defense wasn't that great.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was looking through the Pac-12 stats from last year, and when you were reading off the Big 12 offensive stats, it's interesting to see in the Pac-12 that the general numbers seem to be lower. If you think of the West Coast, you think of high-powered offenses, and it's curious that TCU put up all these yards in the Big 12 and not even that great of a team last year. I'm curious to know your guys' perspective of that. Is that just the way of the Big 12? Are the defenses that weak? Is TCU's offense that talented? Or
well, I think there's a difference, and Cal, I'll let you jump in on this too. But there's a difference between last year's TCU's team and the one before that, right? And like I said, and I kind of alluded to this early on, UCF was surprised because the Big 12 in general was always known as the spread offense conference, right? And last year it was anything but. Kansas had a dynamic quarterback, running back combo. They did it on the ground. Kansas State did it on the ground. Obviously, Oklahoma did it on the ground with Oliver. Texas Tech did it on the ground. Last year was very much smash mouth football between the tackles, A-gap, a lot of zone read A-gap type of offense. So not very high scoring games. If you look at the points per game, right, last year, UCF had 31.3. Texas only had 35.8. TCU had 31.3. Kansas had 34.9. So the two highest ones were Oklahoma with 41.7 and Kansas State with 37.1, right? So everybody else was in the 20s or low 30s. It wasn't a conference of prolific offenses. It wasn't a conference of up-tempo offenses. It was smash-mouth football last year. So I think last year marked a change in how Big 12 football is typically played. And, even Oklahoma, I mean, we played them and it took everything for them to beat us. It just, there was not up-tempo. There was less, there were less plays per game. And it was just more of a smash mouth type of football. And that's why you saw so many close games. Nobody ever broke out of that. In the past, it was just the opposite. It was thrown around the field, spread everybody out, go as rapidly as you can. OSU is a perfect example of that in the past. But last year, you just rode Ollie Gordon the entire season. So it was just a completely different style of football than what we're used to in the Big 12. And Cal, you can speak to that probably a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, what I would say about Oklahoma State is that we just had such a weird start to the season last year. So when I'm looking at this, granted, Big 12 football total team offense, I'm going points per game, and we're in the 20s, we're middle of the pack. But then I see 14 games, and I remember that Big 12 championship game. I go, if that's factoring into this, which it is, then that creates a larger separation than it should, right? If we're just factoring regular season, then I think Oklahoma State would be a little bit higher than it would be. But also 14 games, including the bowl game where we kind of just blew out A&M, so maybe it all kind of evens out a little bit there.
Just throwing a little salt on that wound. I got you.
Of course, yeah. We'll just rub it in there if we can. I do think the start to last season for Oklahoma State of playing three different quarterbacks for three different games, each one was playing in each game. Ollie Gordon touching the ball against South Alabama like 9 to 12 times, and then not really making a huge impact in the other two games as well. But then down the stretch, of course, he was, as Roger said, he's the story of the team, and he's the story of the team coming in this season as well too, rightfully so. So I think Oklahoma State would be a little bit higher, but Brett, to answer your question just more straightforward here, I do think the Big 12 just has so many different types of offenses now. I do think it used to be, all right, you know what, Oklahoma State on defense, our whole motto is just going to be bend, don't break, get some interceptions, get some turnovers. Whereas now it's kind of, hey, you know what, like we should be able to hold some teams. We should be able to stop the run. We should be able to get to third down, make a stop, and then have them turn the ball over. That's how we basically beat OU last year. Just had more, overall more possessions than they did. Overall, we're just able to control the game a lot more, especially running the football that much. And the favorite thing I have about the Big 12 conference last year is that you have all these teams playing really, really close games. But if you just take OU and Texas out of the conference, then all of it looks a lot closer together too. Because you have OU whose defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. And so they were just throwing the ball over the field and really doing every single thing they could to score as many points, because that's how they're going to win games. They just knew their defense wasn't there. And then, of course, you have Jaxon Arnold playing a lot and at the end there. And so they're trying to figure their whole deal out. But you have KU has, Jason Bean playing a lot because Jalen Daniels gets hurt again. And then you have, just so many variety of different things happen last year where I think it just becomes more of like a fluky year from the teams that normally have the best offenses. Those were just kind of fluke. Like they had all had fluky years.
It was a lot of 50-50 distribution run versus pass, where in the past that wasn't the case. The only team that really was heavy pass last year was Texas, believe it or not, as far as how many yards they were putting up. I mean, 258 passing, 228 rushing, 240 passing, 206 rushing, 241 passing, 204 rushing, 205 passing, 228 rushing for West Virginia. So that was really, really run heavy last year. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the teams out from last year averaged over 200 yards a game rushing. That's that's going to slow your games down quite a bit. And it's certainly not the type of offense that you're used to out of the Big 12. So with that, I think it's a little bit of an outlier. And I know it caught us by surprise. And it certainly affected, along with the bevy of injuries that we had. We played 4 centers last year. Let's just put it that way. 4. So, the Big 12 is, I think, and you can speak to this, Brett, better than I can. I feel like the Big 12 right now is much more SEC style in the sense that it's hard-hitting, hard-nosed football versus what you're used to seeing when it comes to the Big 12, which is spread the rock around the field. So, from that perspective, I really think, and then what we learned as UCF fans, the number of injuries that we had, depth is key in this league. And, it doesn't matter if you've got really, really good players. I mean, our quarterback was out for 4 games and we still put up the most yards behind Oklahoma, right? So it's really last year was smash mouth option football with a lot of run heavy offenses that were just playing gaps. It was gap, smash mouth, power football. Some outside zone that was in there, but it was all really, really run heavy to set up the offense.
No, it's funny you talk about depth because we have it be a drinking game on our pod of every time we mention depth, especially when it's in college football, because that's what separates the good teams from the great teams and the good teams from the anybody can roll out a starting lineup that is decent Power 5 or Power 4 level. But look, people talk for Arizona that they were pretty lucky with injuries last year. It's like, I don't know, guys. They lost their starting quarterback and starting running back fairly early in the season, but it was almost like it didn't happen because they had Noah Fafita and a bevy of running backs back there, a bunch of which are gone, but they've reloaded there. It's one thing I would love to understand because I'm looking at these stats, and the thing that confuses me is I see K-State, middle of the Big 12 in terms of yards, but they're number 2 in points per game. What is that? Do they have just a lot of points off turnovers or special teams, or just really efficient drives?
A lot of running the ball. They didn't pass a whole lot, and they had pretty good defense. They would literally play the SEC style of football where they're just going to try to run you over as much as possible. K-State last year had really, really seasoned offensive line, and K-State's kind of known for that. They're also known for 3 stars that turn into really, really good football players. So they rotated their offensive line quite a bit and had really, really good depth there. And they ran the ball a lot, and not just with they ran a lot of options. So they had their running back that ran it down your throat. And then you had your quarterback who was also a running quarterback. And it's going to be interesting this year with their new quarterback because he's actually more dynamic than what their previous quarterback was. We saw him a little bit in our game towards the end of it. But they had a pretty stout defense, just played fundamental football. And, if you look at it, 34 points per game, 37 points per game, 41, 31.3, etc. Texas only averaged 35 points per game. They actually averaged less points per game than what Kansas State did. They're all really, really bunched up teams. And as far as what made Kansas good was it was fundamental. And when they got behind, in fact, I think almost every game that we played, we were ahead at the half. So they just played consistent football and ran it down your throat and had great offensive linemen and linebacker blocking that allowed them to basically control and play ball control and won the close ones because they were consistent and good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever gone on to Sharp College Football Beta Rank with a friend of our pod, Rob Bowron. Used to do 12-pack radio as well. I was pulling up the combined stats of Big 12 and Pac-12 schools, and he does effective. It's kind of like Ken Pom for college football for those that don't pay attention. And he'll have effective offense and effective rush. Kansas was number 2 in the country effective rush. K-State was number 8 in the country in effective rush. UCF 6, West Virginia 4. That sounds like a lot of what you're talking about, smash mouth football. That the numbers seem to back that up. And I also just look at this and see, boy, Oregon's offense was way the hell out there, and they're going to probably be even more insane. But in that powerhouse conference, and Oklahoma's gone, and the top remaining team in the new Big 12 offense, I'm going to selfishly point out, according to this, was Arizona.
There you go. I mean,
but you guys played Pac-12 defenses. I mean,
we can't play USC every weekend.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We're big fans of their defensive coordinator there, Alex Grinch, because I think he's. I wish he was still the OU defense coordinator because we were able to score on him, and everyone could score on that defense. Weirdly enough. But to answer your question more, also just to add on more about the K-State. K-State scored the second most amount of points on average per game last year, and they allowed the second least. So I mean, they were outscoring teams. And their average points scored was 37. The average points allowed was 21. And also, but with that being said, they allowed the third most amount of yards. So they just really didn't let guys get in the end zone. So they're really good at that. But also, I mean, to give Oklahoma State some love, we look like the opposite of that. I mean, overall defense, we were allowing 29 points per game. And offensively, it's not like we were just showing up and just really taking names. We were scoring, again, 29 points a game. Now, of course, that Big 12 championship game and the South Alabama game, once you add those in, it makes a lot more sense because we lost South Alabama 33-7 at home. But with all that being said, maybe that answers a little bit more of the K-State query, just because they are a very odd team to prepare for, I'd say. Going into that game last year, I was going, there's no way we win this. I mean, there's just no way we win and pull this one out, but it'll be fun and get to go to the game. It's in Stillwater. It's with my dad. But then when we did, I was kind of shocked just because the way the game played out was, okay, maybe this is how we could win games down the stretch. And sure enough, it was for OSU, but it wasn't something we had previously had any kind of success with, playing that kind of play style where we ran it a lot. And even though we're talking about Ollie Gordon and Oklahoma State running the ball a lot too, I got to fact check myself a little bit. We had 1,300 yards more through the air than we did on the ground last year too. So this Oklahoma State team could be a little bit more like that this year. But then again, I think a lot of that is early on in the season, airing it out, trying to get back in games, especially those first three, playing against the.
We might have thrown we might have thrown your scoring average off last year a little bit.
Roger, I was waiting until you were going to chime in about that 45-3 game. I was just waiting. I was trying to hold that out for as long as I could, but that 45-3 could also. I mean, you look at the Oklahoma State team scores last year, and it's a wild difference game to game. I mean, K-State, we won by 10, and we lose by 42. Yeah, granted in the bounce house, but still losing by 42 to another Big 12 team is absurd, no matter who it is. So you got that going as well. One of the few teams to actually have more rushing yards than passing yards, believe it or not, Cincinnati, which I just would not have guessed. I mean, granted, they weren't making. They weren't setting records there doing that, but just wouldn't have guessed off the top of my head either.
Yeah, and their backup running back is actually looking like he's going to be our third string running back for us. So it's it's interesting to think about what the Big 12 and how much of a variance it was from what you traditionally see and expect out of Big 12 football. I'm gonna put it out there, and I'm just gonna say that this way. I think the Pac schools are going to be surprised how physical this league is. The lines, I was just looking at Utah's offensive linemen. Actually, a lot of them are right around 290 pounds, 299, 300 pounds, whatever. A lot of D lines in the Big 12 are running. Interior linemen are running 315, 330. So it'll be really interesting to see because they're not going to be able to out physical, a lot of the teams and D lines in the Big 12. But it's going to be interesting to see, in Utah's case, does their execution make up for that? Right. Body on body, execution style. that they're gonna play. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Pac-12's schools integrate into the Big 12 this year.
Well, that's a really interesting point, and it's also giving me some anxiety as an Arizona fan because our D line just got a lot smaller in the roster turnover. And they're also kind of, some of that's probably by design. Dwayne Aquina has stayed on. Well, he kind of left for a half second to go to Texas, and then came back as the defensive coordinator. But the linemen last year, I think the average starters were all 315 to 345 on the defensive line, and they were rotating a lot of guys. But some of them graduated, some of them transferred out. Some of that, I think, was people. Bill Norton transferred out. He came in from Georgia and was a really great defensive, space heater in the middle and really effective guy. And now they've replaced it with, Kevin Darton from Syracuse, who's like 5'11", like 260 defensive tackle. Is disruptive, but it's a different style of play. And it sounds like Arizona's going to be very attacking. And that could, that's a boom or bust defensive style, right? And it probably isn't the best against a bunch of really effective executing offenses that have an effective rushing attack. And then I think of a school like Colorado, who, was one of the worst teams at running the ball last year and just, relied on Shedeur Sanders to be really good.
Listen, their social media told us that they're throwing darts now. So, Yeah,
which that's some kind of a dartboard, but it's going to land in the bullseye. It's going to be.
You can edit it in. Just edit it in. It'll be fine.
Well, then Arizona State was just kind of a mess last year, and they're probably still, digging themselves out from not really having a lot of recruiting classes. So I think, as much as I believe in Kenny Dillingham, that he was a good hire. I actually called that hire when he was still at Oregon, like 12 months ahead of time. I think we were talking to the guy from Colorado, from Ralphie Report, and I was like, I think it's going to be Kenny Dillingham, and it sure as hell was. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for the Utah probably is going to be the team that fits the best in that Big 12 style of play, and I think that your premonition that they'll just out execute people is kind of their MO anyway, so that makes sense to me. Arizona returns a pretty solid offensive line despite losing their first round pick left tackle, and their 4-star heir apparent at left tackle was just said to be not available for the year. So it sounds like they're going to be going with a redshirt freshman at left tackle, which against Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl last year, Jordan Morgan, the first round pick, sat out, and let's just say it was noticeable. And if it wasn't for all those turnovers that went Arizona's way, that game was really going Oklahoma's way, and they were having their way with Arizona's lines. So I think, Roger, your point is that people are going to be surprised that it coming over of like, oh no, this is a physical, in the trenches kind of conference. Tracks with what I'm seeing. I think Utah's going to be the best fit in that sense, but there's also, you can scheme around a few things, and defenses like Arizona are still returning a potential first round pick at corner, where maybe that means you can sell out a little bit more with your defensive, your front seven, and leave him on an island and find ways to control these effective running games. But man, it's going to be an interesting battle of teams that I think all generally play to their strengths effectively. I'm talking to you guys, talking to other podcasts, and it seems like everyone just actually knows what kind of identity they have and do it well, and see how that plays out when they're playing each other week in, week out.
Well, I expect UCF to pass more this year. Last 2 years we had JRP, which was he was a quarterback for like 3 games, then went to wide receiver, then came back. He was kind of learning the year before last, and then last year he was hurt. So, his strength was really his running ability. So he was more like a third. He was a second running back that could throw. But this year with KJ Jefferson, his strength is more staying in the pocket, extending the play, and then if he either sees a read on an option or he has to roll out, he can make things happen with his feet. And he's a much bigger guy. He's 6'4", 240 pounds, if you believe the roster notes, but I think he might be a little bit heavier than that. He was a little heavier than that, and looks like he's got himself into better shape. But it's going to be a different style offense because he's got a cannon of an arm. We've got pretty good wide receivers, so I expect, at least for UCF's part, you're still going to get a heavy dose of running because that's a strength. We got RJ Harvey. We've got Penny Boone, 2 1,400-yard backs from last year. And you got Miles Montgomery, who's a good back in his own right, had 800 yards last year. That's going to be backing those two up. So, we'll still go run heavy, but I think you're going to see more of us airing it out than you have in the past, as well as having a much better pass catching tight end in play as well.
Well, I do want to ask you guys as well here just about the coaches poll that came out recently here and how you think that kind of fits into the groupings here of Big 12 contenders, right? I mean, I Roger, don't want to say, hey, I don't see UCF in the top 25, but they're not in the top 25 in the coaches poll. KJ Jefferson, I think, could be a great addition to the team there. But as far as how the coaches poll comes out right now, you've got a bunch of teams in the Big 12 all together. Utah, highest ranked, and then you've got kind of a grouping there of K-State, Oklahoma State, and basically right behind Arizona and then Kansas. Do you guys think that all these teams here are deserving of the coaches poll ranking spots, or should it shift around a little bit? I know it's kind of just some offseason fun stuff to talk about as well.
I'll take a first crack at this. I think I think all of these teams can make a reasonable case to be ranked. Preseason polls are fun for content generation, but nobody really knows, right? And it would not shock me if UCF ends up ranked by week 3 or 4, right? I think the Big 12 is 1 through 10. You could probably make strong case. There's a lot of depth in this conference. I think there's only a handful of teams that are they're not going to, ASU is just not going to get there. Houston's probably not going to get there, right? But there's, who am I to say, obviously I'm an Arizona honk, so I think Arizona probably could be a little bit higher, but they have some questions. Is Utah maybe a little high if Cam Rising isn't healthy? Yeah, probably. K-State can make a strong case. Oklahoma State, I think, can make a strong case. It's a kind of, we talk about we're talking about these offenses and how they performed in their conferences last year, and it strikes me that basically the 4 teams from the Pac-12 and the legacy Big 12 teams are basically all of those. It's all that's left. They pulled out the super elite teams, the Oregons, the Oklahomas, and all that next tier of guys that are competitive or can have consistent success and occasional brilliance are all going to be beating up on each other. And what does that look like? And I think it could be something where it's like Big 12 in basketball, where you have a bunch of ranked teams that have mediocre records, but everybody knows they're all pretty decent, or they could beat themselves up and not have hardly any Big 12 teams that are ranked by the middle of the season. I'm not sure.
Well, I do think what's bizarre to me as just a longtime Big 12 fan is seeing KU in there. And seeing KU in there with a new quarterback who I'm saying new kind of tongue in cheek here just because, Jalen Daniels has been around, but he hasn't finished out a full season in quite some time. So he's just had plenty of injury history. If I was KU, I'd be just nervous about that period. They're all playing all of their games this year that are home games, technically speaking, are all going to be in Kansas City, the Chiefs Stadium, which is, an hour away, but it still isn't right in the backyard there. How many students are going to show up that are all, you would think, extremely excited about this team and all the surrounding stuff around him too. And then the other thing with KU is just that when I did some more research, dug in, they only play K-State. They don't play Oklahoma State. They don't play Utah. They don't play Arizona. They have an extremely easy schedule. So looking at their odds to win the Big 12, they're third. They're right there behind Utah, K-State, then there's a drop, and then there's KU. And all due respect, I love the Pokes and Oklahoma State, but we're right there kind of with KU to win the Big 12 odds when when if you were just looking at this from last year and you're just, you're not watching the games, you're just watching the box score, right? And you're just taking all that info, you go, well, how's the team that was in the Big 12 championship last year not back, not one of the top 2, not top 3 when they returned 20 starters? But then again, you look at the schedule and you go, okay, hang on a second, KU's up there. And that's the one to me where I go, you know what, if UCF was 24, I wouldn't bat an eye. I'd be like, oh yeah, of course. But seeing KU up there, I'm going, okay, sweet. I know Lance Leipold's a good coach. I know they've got a quarterback that's, going to be in the Big 12 all-team discussions the whole year if he's healthy. But same point, that's the one where I go, all right, what are we doing? I just, until I'm proven wrong, until something changes, I'd and really see some success and some history of it for KU. Football is just it's still KU football. There's just it's kind of funny to say out loud that we think they could be good again.
I mean, well, I'm just biased and an apologist for any school that is traditionally a basketball school getting football success. So I kind of, bank shot for Arizona, want to be like, no, yeah, they can maintain success because it's kind of like looking in a mirror.
They'd be great rivals for you guys. I mean, hey, if that's the new football rivalry is KU and AU, or U of A, so I should say, I really want to be AU, KU, because that'd be more fun to say, but U of A and KU, I think that'd be a fun deal no matter what there. I mean, we know they'll be rivals. We know you guys will be rivals in basketball no matter what.
Kind of taking a look to your guys' points about who is in the top 25 preseason. Number one, the preseason poll never gets it right. You got people like Miami ranked at number 19. You've got Texas at number 4. They actually sort of deserve it after last year, right? But traditionally they don't. Ole Miss at number 6.
That's insane.
Why? Like, do you really think that Ole Miss is the number? I don't even know if they're the 4th best team in the SEC. I mean,
it's the Jaxon Dart revenge tour, right? Where he's eventually going to be good. This is the year he's good.
Hey, I just got to point out, with Ole Miss being ranked number 6, this is the first time in my life I think I've ever seen the start of where teams are overranked be one spot before Notre Dame.
That's true, 100%. But I mean, Oklahoma State's number 18. I think when we start looking at the Big 12, I think there's a couple of things that are going on. It's very hard to predict who's going to end up at the top at the end of the year. With as many close games, even UCF in conference, we finished 6-6 before we got to our bowl game, and it's very, very hard because 3 or 4 of those games could have very easily gone the other way, and now you're talking about a 9-win team versus a 6-win team, right? When you're talking about Iowa, like, how do you rank Iowa number 25? Like, their offense was putrid last year, right? They won games against a putrid Big Ten, right? Their schedule was like Illinois and Indiana and whatever, right? Not very good teams. But at the end of the day, I think the problem that the Big 12 is going to have is, to your point, Brett, there's a lot of very, very good teams, but they're all very, very evenly matched. And when you go back to the Big 12 coaches poll, like what we did in conference at media days, UCF was ranked number 8. I think that, and everybody kept saying dark horse, national media and local media, dark horse for UCF, and they're ranked number 8. I think the top 10 teams have an opportunity in the Big 12 this year to make a lot of noise. It'll be really, really interesting, but it's hard to place Big 12 teams and say this team is the clear favorite, other than Utah, which people expect to be good. But they even have a question mark with Cam Rising. If Cam Rising had a 2022 season and we were coming into the 2024 season with those 2022 stats, I think Utah would be ranked higher. But he's coming back off of an injury, right? So it's really hard to place the Big 12 teams and how they stack in the top 25 right now. And I think that's really more of what you're seeing. But there's always going to be bias based on brand in the preseason coaches polls. But I think a lot of if you look at the out of conference schedule before we get into conference schedule, each team has a team that they could win against, or most of them do, that would make some noise nationally. For UCF, it's UF, right? On our schedule. We're going to play them in the Swamp this year. We beat UF in the Swamp. You know, we're going to make noise. Then we have TCU as well early on in the season, right? So this is preseason rankings for a reason, and they're really a dog and pony show when it comes to brand. There's teams on here that aren't going to be anywhere close to the top 25 by the end of the year, but their brand value puts them there. Florida State's going to be interesting. They start at number 10. You know, where's Florida State going to end up this year? Mizzou at number 11? Mizzou hasn't made any noise, right? Where's Mizzou coming up at number 11? How are they ranked above LSU? I don't understand that. So, you know, you've got a bunch after 13. You've got, for the Big 12, you've got Utah. You've got K-State, which we all expect to be good again this year. They're only one below Oklahoma. You've got Oklahoma State as number 18. Then you've got Arizona at 21, and you got Kansas at 24. Kansas, to me, is a little questionable, but a lot of people like Jaden Daniels. But you've got basically, just like the coaches internally were saying, you've got 5 bunched up because nobody knows who's going to rise to the top and contend and be that college football playoff, contender. That's going to make for a great football season, and it's not going to be boring, right? But it's nationally, they're going to try to figure it out. And that's the one thing that's bad about the Big 12 is it's great football. It's must-see football. It'll be exciting till the end of the season. We aren't going to have Alabama that's going to be at the top of the league every year. So it's going to be great for fans, right? At the same time, for a national perspective, it's going to be tough because, you know, thank goodness we have an auto bid to the playoff, because we probably wouldn't have that because we're going to have a couple losses here and there because the teams are so good within conference. And I think that hurts the brand perception too for the league. And
to take all of your points, I agree with all of your points there. And the opportunity for this conference to establish himself, as you said, was in the non-conference schedule. But one of those teams we just listed as being ranked, fair or not, is going to not be ranked after week 3 probably, because we have K-State and Arizona playing each other, and so one of them is going to take a loss. And it's not, they may end up, one or both of them could be at the top of the conference by the end of the year. It won't be in their conference record, but it may ding the national perception, and each of those teams loses an opportunity to beat up on somebody else to elevate the perception of the conference. And they're 2 of, certainly the top 4 or 5 teams in the conference, I think, consensus. And then one of them is going to have a loss that it's in lieu of a chance of beating another non-conference team from another conference that helps the overall conference, not to use the word conference 17 times in the same sentence, but it's a nuance that's going to, I think, have a
new drinking game. It's the new Big 12 Huddle drinking game. How many times can we say conference in the span of 30 seconds?
And if we make it a drinking game, how long will we be able to intelligibly say the word conference if we drink every time we say it?
Depends on what we're drinking.
It's definitely a good question there. I have a problem with several teams that are ranked higher than Big 12 teams, but of course, first is OU, but then to go on with it, you guys said off the bat though, it's Ole Miss. I don't get how Ole Miss is ranked as high as they are. Lane Kiffin can be an incredibly good head coach, but he's not top 10 head coach with that offense, I wouldn't think. I'm on the other hand though, very happy that Colorado's not ranked up there. We're all at least a little bit, the other coaches are at least a little bit sober and seeing that the way that some of us are in the public of, Colorado does not deserve to be ranked, even if it is in the preseason coaches poll, right? I mean, they're over under from Vegas is 5.5 wins. And if they get to 6, I'd be shocked, honestly, looking at their schedule too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a media machine, right? That's the media doing that, not the college football coaches. I mean, if you look at it last year, how they performed, you look at what their chancellor said this year and what their expectations are for the season. I don't think they're expecting to be ranked at the end of the season either. Their goal is to get to a bowl and hopefully win a bowl game. And go ahead, Brett. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I'm looking at even at the tail end of the rankings and the schools that are right in there. We're talking about KU maybe shouldn't be in there, but I'm not convinced USC is going to be there at the end of the year. I think they're going to be in for a world of hurt going to the Big Ten and traveling across the country to the East Coast is for a program that is underachieved. I don't think they're going to do well. The school that's right outside the top 25 behind Iowa is Washington. They lost a lot. Jed Fish thought he was going to steal Arizona's entire roster. He stole a bunch of the recruiting class, but if you're going to play a bunch of true freshmen after you lost all the talent you have, I think if they get to a bowl game, that's a huge win for them in that Big Ten. And so, I'm looking at these things and it's like
NC State. Is NC State really one spot behind Arizona as far as a team is concerned? I don't think so.
Not at all.
Yeah, I can make more of an argument that Arizona is more underranked than a lot of teams that are like the teams that they're right in front of. I feel like they are more significantly better than being a couple of spots ahead of. But who am I going to have them leapfrog?
Well, and Brett, to your point earlier, I mean, this is the, hey, this is a great media talking point. This is a great deal just because you look at USC's schedule. Well, non-conference, they play LSU. And I'm supposed to think USC is going to get to 6 wins this year when they go Big Ten and their non-con game is an actually tough game. Too?
Who are they playing, though, in the Big Ten? That's the question.
Well, okay, so they do have a couple of the teams that I'd go, all right, so you got Nebraska. They do have UCLA on the schedule, of course, which I don't think will be better than them at all. Then they also have Washington, and then they have Rutgers. But Rutgers might be good. We don't know for sure. Then the teams
Rutgers is not going to be good. Greg Schiano, he was good when they were in the Big East, but it's going to take him a long time to recover Rutgers.
They at least have been talked about as a dark horse Big Ten team, not a bottom of the entire conference team. Is just maybe where I'd leave it at if I'm putting some stock in Rutgers. But
you're talking about USC, dude. This is
But I'm talking about Lane Kiffin and no defense
versus Rutgers here. You know what I mean?
But I'm not talking about Caleb Williams. Line up a QB for him. I'm talking about I'm talking about their defense not being anything to talk about. I'm talking about their defensive coordinator who they stole from UCLA this offseason here to implement a new defensive scheme. I'm not the USC team overall. I don't want to get stuck on Rutgers because I could be totally wrong on them completely. And JR may have filled my head here from the college huddle completely about how Rutgers could be a dark horse Big Ten team. But with that being said, they've got Notre Dame on the schedule. They've got Penn State. They've got Wisconsin. They've got Michigan as well. And then they've got to go to Maryland, and then they're back home immediately for Rutgers, then to Washington. To Brett's point, they are traveling quite a bit. They do not have they're not playing Ohio State, but they're playing a lot of other top teams.
Welcome to UCF football. We had the most travel miles last year of any team in the entire country. So, USC, you get your golden plated toilets on your private jets and make it happen, dude. It's a 5-hour flight. I used to do that for work all the time. It's not that big of a deal.
The nuance is, I hear you on the UCF thing, but it's easier going east to west to go play a game than going west to east.
That's true.
Of the time.
From an NFL perspective, that 100% rings true.
And that's where I'm looking at USC. I think they're kind of lucky that they're getting Wisconsin at home and Penn State at home, because those would be games if they were on the road. I think they'd lose. They're going on the road in the first 3 weeks at LSU and at Michigan. They're going to get blown the hell out in those games. And in between, Utah State has had that might be a trap game at home if they're licking their wounds from getting destroyed in at LSU. I don't see them. I think they're going to struggle to make a bowl. That's why I just don't think they're going to be a top 25 team. And they're going to play Washington at Washington, who's probably going to be in a similar boat. So that might be for bowl eligibility, that game in Seattle in the fall. And I'm not sure. I just don't have USC in the last 10 years. You made the golden plated toilets on their, all this stuff. There's a softness that comes from that sometimes, and that's, as a Pac-12 guy, you've seen that show up in USC underachieving a lot since Pete Carroll left that program.
How many USC coaches have gotten fired on the tarmac without even really getting off the plane fully. Yeah, I mean that's what I remember is the Lane Kiffin, the
more than 0, that's more than you should have.
right. Yeah. So that Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, Clay Helton, I think maybe I've kind of forget how that one turned out, but USC would be the team to me where I go, okay, I get it, they're ranked, but are you ranked off of just brand recognition and name and head coach being prominent? Because it's a new quarterback, it's a new defensive coordinator. It's just they've got a lot of stuff up in the air. But again, we are the Big 12 Huddle, and I'm deep diving us into USC talk here, so maybe I should just stop.
Yeah, I think we should pivot
a little bit. Well, we can talk about the team that just left the Pac-12 and joined the Big 12 here that apparently has darts everywhere. Darts only here in Colorado. Just really, really hamming it up. So if you haven't seen this so far, the whole podcast here, of course, is on YouTube. So I just want to show here the first clip here of Colorado doing something a little weird here. A little weird.
The one that started it all was this clip.
Yeah. So we always have some fun here with Colorado here, but should be able to see this here.
Man, look at that throw.
Somehow he just caught it. Wait, what?
No, we don't.
So Colorado clearly doing something a little different there, that's for sure. But there are some other teams here took liberty of this year. So Vandal football, which is not Vanderbilt, but of course Idaho football here, they had some fun with it. They saw what Colorado was doing. And they go, you know what? We think we could also just have a little bit more fun here and show everyone up a little bit better than we've been shown up, at least with this clip here. Some other quarterback throws it to their quarterback indoors and then goes outdoors here. So you've got that one here.
Did you see that accurate spin on that ball where it actually was able to turn to the right mid? See that?
Ooh.
That was amazing. I mean, like if we could teach KJ how to do that, I'd be really happy to see that.
Oh, if you guys are able to do that, please let us know, because you know what? We got a new quarterback coming in next year. There's no way Alan Bowman gets an 8th year of eligibility. So would love to see how you guys are pulling that one off.
Hey, he could get a hover round NIL deal like Cam Rising.
Hey, maybe. Hey, he might need it, honestly, to improve a little bit of his accuracy and his mobility. But then you got the Portland Timbers here having fun with it, with their goalie throwing it right into the back of the net as well. And then last one here I had pulled up at least was good old the Herd Bros, but so it wasn't actually the college themselves, but good old Marshall here has some fun with it here, implementing college football 25 as well, with darts only here as their quarterback lines up, throws it right into the to the receiver wide open for a touchdown. So yeah, I'm sure you're enjoying the narration here if you're not watching this. So please head over to YouTube, link in the description here.
All gas, no brakes right there.
But yeah, that is just prime social media content here that we're getting.
Prime social media content?
Yeah, you're picking up what I'm putting down. I love it. Yeah, there we go. So calm down a little bit, Colorado. We can chill out a little bit. We don't need to hear about your 2 5-star players. They're both on the same team all the time. And I do love how in that clip, Travis Hunter, the star wide receiver / DB, was playing DB and got burnt. So showed off their own guy getting burnt there, even in the back-to-back clips that they somehow strung together. So it's a lot of fun there as well too.
I'm just shocked the internet hasn't done a Jaxon darts only video, especially with somebody getting clever with the stories of the last 24 hours of him and his girlfriend exposing him for maybe cheating on TikTok. Like there's a content video there with the darts only thing and Jaxon darts.
Just give it time. Let it cook a little bit. I'm telling you right now, this, it probably could have been one of those things that nobody really cared about. But then all of a sudden, all these other colleges and professional and semi-pro teams started, carrying on with the tradition of the darts. And I think this is going to become a thing. Tomorrow, I would expect that we're going to see a lot more. And the bad part about this is, there's some poor college intern social media person that is getting absolutely roasted and feels terrible for their edit. I mean, you know that because nobody they did not expect anybody to figure that out. So, they're just like, oh, I'm going to string these two things together. There's 2 shots. It looks great. All right, let me post it. And now it's like all of college football is piling on.
I bet that poor intern there, like Coach Prime, was probably pressuring them. We need to compile all of our highlights from our practice to put a hype video out. And that was literally the 2 best plays of practice. Pass that was going to be incomplete.
How do you really feel about Colorado, Brett? I mean, seriously.
Stick a knife in their back and keep rubbing it in here. Just keep shoving it all the way through.
They put the target on their back when they try to play the hype and media attention game. And sometimes, one could argue that maybe they are getting what they wanted here. They're getting attention out of it, even if, no press is bad press kind of thing.
They got season ticket sales.
They sold out a spring game. I can't wait for them to put out that banner. Sold out spring game 2023. What, right? That was it. So
I don't know. I mean, look, good for the program. They got what they needed out of it. But the rest of college football is having a little bit of fun, and that's what you get when you hype something. George O'Leary, who was a former UCF football coach, also Georgia Tech, and a few others. He always said, and Notre Dame for all of about 24 hours. He said, when you either get exposure or you get exposed, one of the two. And right now, it's one of those get exposed moments for Colorado.
I think we're all just kind of waiting for Deion Sanders to get rumored to take the Dallas Cowboys job after Mike McCarthy fails again in the playoffs, or just really see what Deion's next step is, because there's a next step.
I don't know. The most recent article was about a bunch of disgruntled Colorado players and what that program was to be in under Deion. And so I don't see any good things coming out of the Deion experiment long term. So we'll see what happens if he gets out of Dodge before it turns bad, kind of like what our good friend Jim Harbaugh did at Michigan. He didn't know about any of it, right? He didn't know that it was bad to have recruits over to stay the night in their Snuggies together. None of that stuff. But at the end of the day, coaches like that, and Prime has got enough of brand cachet that if something were to happen where it could be a bad situation, he's going to bounce anyway. I mean, his son's going to be there. He's going to bounce to the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised if Deion doesn't go back to the NFL and coaching next year.
Yeah, if he wins, then it's all brilliant. If he loses, it's a tired thing. And I just pulled up their schedule. We talked about some of the non-conference chances for some of these teams. Man, I'd be nervous. North Dakota State coming to Boulder. They traveled to Arizona, and that was a slog of a game, and Arizona pulled that out, and they've beaten how many D1 schools in the last number of years.
And how many times did they win the championship? For their division. So they're 5
out of the last 8 or something like that.
Yeah, they've always played really, really well.
Yeah.
Did they have the Kibble Bowl or whatever that indoor stadium they have up there? Because in Idaho it's so cold that you can't play outside.
I forget what it is, but North Dakota State did also lose their coach. I think he might have gone to USC, if I recall correctly. So that might be something different, but that program is a program, if you will, like that program where they just reload. And by the way, if you guys ever get a chance for them to schedule a non-conference game, it's kind of horrifying because you're like, it's only downside for your team, but their fan base travels like insane.
Oklahoma State's playing the FCS champion last year. That's on a 27-0 win streak in South Dakota State University.
Mm-hmm.
Not looking forward to it at all. And they're no North Dakota State, which I would also be worried about, the team that has 2 guys still on NFL rosters, at least a quarterback. I mean, Carson Wentz and Trey Lance are not Hall of Famers, but at the end of the day, you're an FCS team who's got 2 quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not taking you lightly at all,
I will say this: I am
Definitely
looking forward to playing Colorado on the 28th, September 28th. So that's going to be a fun game. Gus, it's kind of funny because Gus talked about that actually in his opening season, his opening camp comments, because he was asked about playing prime and all that other stuff. And he's like, look, we're both considered outsiders. We're not traditionalists, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus. But at the same time, he's like, it's going to be a big game just because the media is going to hype it. So I'm actually hoping they do well by the time they get to the 28th. They'll have Nebraska, they'll have North Dakota State, they'll have Baylor, and they'll have Colorado State. So they may be in a good situation by the time they get to us. And if we play our cards right, it might be a pretty hype game.
If it's a really hyped game, Roger, what's the over/under of number of dartboards in the student section for that?
Listen. I'm gonna say that's a 1-to-1 odd right there. Right, there's gonna be one student with one dartboard, because our social media team and our football program does not disappoint when it comes to something like that, and we would be one that did it. We are the Wendy's of social media and college football, right? So I 100% would see that. In fact, I know the head of that department. I may just hit up Eric DeSalvo and be like, "Hey, quick suggestion: dartboards to the student section for that Colorado game."
Brett, you might have just given the whole nation an idea when they play Colorado here for this year. I mean, that November 29th or so game when we play Colorado, I'm thinking about driving up to Boulder and just bringing several dartboards with me just to hand out to the other students there. They'd have fun with it for sure. Other fellow Oklahoma State guys who travel.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be the only one that came up with that idea by the time the season rolls around.
No, but if I can put out this podcast quick enough, you might be the first. So we'll do it that way. Yeah, go ahead and stamp that. Get that trademarked and everything there. Well, Roger and Brett, any other things here to add here for the latest episode of the Big 12 Huddle?
Just that I just messaged Eric DeSalvo to make sure we got those dartboards. So great idea. Appreciate that, Brett. Other than that, hey, I know we're not at the season yet, but I am, this is the part of the season that's exciting where we don't have, fixed rosters yet. There's a lot of variability that's going on out there, but I think the Big 12 season is going to be another exciting season. I think you won't be disappointed. One of the best things about being in the Big 12 basketball conference for us was, you can go 500 and still be in contention for the NCAA tournament. And I think, Brett, you guys are going to be excited about that. But for football, I think this is going to be just as fun a conference as it is for basketball when it comes to, being able to play, not necessarily having to be undefeated and still having meaningful games that are going to be a lot of fun. So I think it's the closest to the SEC experience that you're going to get, even for the mediocre teams, as any given Saturday, anybody could win. And, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I'm personally really excited. It feels like, at least in this inaugural year for football and basketball, it's Arizona sliding into a conference where they're going to be like competitive and with a lot of teams that are competitive, and it's going to be a slog and fun every game. And I'm excited to see how they do it.
Cal, any parting words or shots?
OU sucks. That's going to be my motto here for 2024. They decided,
dude, you got to find another one. They're not in the conference anymore. So I know their listeners, who knows if they're going to actually hear it anymore. You got to find a new person to pick on now.
Well, I'm not going to pick on UCF because we've only beat you in women's tennis so far.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. So you know what? I'll find something else for the next podcast. We're always going to have one at the end here, and OU, sayonara, and goodbye.
Maybe the Bear Kittens.
The Cincinnati guy joined the CGA tour for a podcast in the Big 12 Huddle. So, really here, I'll give West Virginia some crap here because Ryan and Rush show they're on next week here, so they have a lot to live up to here from Brett and Adam joining. But yeah, we'll West Virginia Mountaineers, I hope you like how Oklahoma State does things, because so far you have not beaten us anytime recently here in football. So it's been a good deal so far. And basketball, that was our first conference win last year, was against West Virginia. So, and that was in a real bad year for us overall.
Yeah,
Didn't
win against UCF there either.
No, we know that, but you didn't have to say that either. But I'm glad,
yes, I did.
You did. I'm sure.
Just remember, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it this way with the West Virginia thing. Hide your couches.
Hide your couches. Going to leave politics out of it, but I could make it jokes. But you know what? With that being said, here we're going to go ahead and end out the latest episode of the Big 12 Huddle. Thanks so much for subscribing, following, sharing here on the new feed here, just Big 12 Huddle podcast. Please follow Brett and Adam in their podcast, Wildcat Radio 2.0. And then, of course, if you're not already, you got to get all the UCF content you can with a former UCF player and with Roger/Nye Bengal from the United Ones podcast. And then if you're not listening to the Greatest Oklahoma State sounding podcast so far and the Greatest Oklahoma State podcast, the CGA Tour, please do so as well, too. We'll catch you guys all again soon. And thanks so much for everyone for listening.
Go Knights!